Hello, everyone. Jax West from Justice with Jax, Stephen Avery Project, MAM Gossip. Going live today to read the petition for executive clemency for Melissa Calusinski. I just got this today. I know it was filed a few weeks ago or whatever, but I just got it today. So I wanted to read through it with y'all. And as usual, when I read stuff like on Stephen Avery's case, I have not read this yet. So this will be the first time that I read it. I don't have one of the recent pictures of Melissa and I up here. It's still downstairs. But here's Melissa and I. Um this is 37 pages, and but I think a lot of it are things that there's no need to read. So I don't think reading this will take that long. And then after I read it, I will talk a little bit about the case. So, petition for executive clemency before the Illinois Prisoner Review Board, advising the Honorable J.B. Pritzker, Governor. The undersigned petitioner prays for a pardon of her conviction for first-degree murder and support thereof states as follows. Now, let me pause right there a second. Honorable J.B. Pritzker, Governor. So this is the governor of Illinois. I live in Illinois. I work in politics. I actually worked on JB's first campaign when he was running for governor. I am a huge JB Pritzker supporter. I'm going to sound like a douchebag right now, but when I go to political events and JB sees me, he knows who I am. In one of his campaigns, I don't know if it's the first one or the second one, I was in one of his commercials. I went to both of his inaugurations. I love JB Pritzker. And years ago, I brought Melissa's dad to meet with JB to talk about Melissa's case. So, JB is somebody that I actually really respect. And I have not talked to him personally about this case. I don't know if I can. I guess that's something I should ask Kathleen Zellner. I have a political event that I'm going to tomorrow. There's a political event that I'm going to on Tuesday. Another one I'm going to on Wednesday. Another one on Thursday. And then another one on Saturday next week. I mean, so there's a chance I'm going to see the governor before this goes before the is this the parole, not or probation, parole probation review board? I don't know. And I don't know if I should say something or not to him. And I have somebody else to talk about, but I'll wait until if he's mentioned in here anywhere. All right, so let me go back to this. Required information. I don't need to read any of that because it's like Melissa's full name. It's so funny. Address is the prison address. Phone number is the prison phone number. Her date of birth, her place of birth, her social security number, her prison number, the name she was convicted under, any aliases or military service or previous filings. Public hearing. Petition would like to request a public hearing. Next section is conviction for which pardon is sought. Offense. First-degree murder and aggravated battery of a child. The case number, the date of arrest was January 16th, 2009. County of conviction is Lake County. Type of trial, first-degree murder. Her sentencing judge was Daniel B. Shane. The date sentenced was February 23, 2012. Her sentence was 31 years. Time served based on petitioner's custody date of December 30, 2008. And as of April 25th, 2024, she has served 5,595 days, which is 15 years and 4 months that Melissa has been in prison. She's 38 now. Appeal. Petitioner filed her direct appeal on May 17, 2013. The Illinois Court of Appeals denied her direct appeal on February 19, 2014. On September 24, 2014, the Illinois Supreme Court denied discretionary review. Petitioner filed her post-conviction petition in the State Circuit Court on June 23, 2015. Petitioner's petition for leave to appeal the denial of her post-conviction petition was denied by the Illinois Supreme Court on September 26, 2018. Petitioner filed a petition for writ of habeas corpus in the Northern District of Illinois on March 27, 2019. The petition has not been ruled on and will be stayed pending the outcome of this clemency petition. Next section is titled Detailed Account of the Offense, and there's a footnote. And the footnote says, please note that undersigned counsel have not attached a complete copy of the court record to this petition, as the record contains thousands of documents. Rather, in an effort to be of utmost assistance to the board, undersigned counsel has included a USB drive that contains electronic copies of those exhibits, pieces of evidence, transcripts, decisions, and court filings most relevant to the issues set forth in this petition. Counsel will gladly provide a copy of the complete court record if it is requested. These prior court documents and exhibits, including the complete recording of Melissa's interrogation, which are most relevant to the issues set forth, are attached as Group Exhibit A. So now back up. Petitioner was convicted of the first-degree murder of Ben Kingen, who tragically died on January 14, 2009. Compounding the tragedy of Ben's death is that petitioner, known by all to be kind-hearted and caring, and who has no history of violence and had absolutely no motive to harm Ben, was convicted based on irrefutably false medical evidence offered by the state's testifying experts, as well as a completely unreliable, false confession that was coerced based on false medical facts. Petitioner brings forth this petition for executive clemency because her conviction for first-degree murder is one in which this board can have no confidence. Statement of facts. Ben and his twin sister Emily were born on August 31, 2007. At the age of 9 weeks, Ben and Emily began attending daycare at Minnie Subi in the village of Lincolnshire, Illinois. The parents of Ben and Emily had been using the daycare center for several years for their older children. Melissa, who has always loved children and worked with children, was the full-time teacher's assistant in Ben and Emily's classroom. On January 14, 2009, Ben was 16 months old. That day, no fewer than 6 daycare providers cared for Ben. One of the providers saw Ben throw himself backwards. Later, while Melissa was out of the room, another daycare provider, Nancy Kalinger, observed Ben throw his head back hard against the tile floor and cry. Nancy sat Ben upright. Shortly thereafter, he was lying on the ground again. Nancy picked Ben up and placed him in a bouncy chair, where he immediately became lethargic. So, let me pause on that and tell you that Ben had a history of being what they keep calling a headbanger. Now, me being a girl that into metal music and rock music, headbanger means a totally different thing. But in Ben's case, it was, when he was unhappy or whatever, he would whip himself backwards and his head would hit the floor. It's something that was widely known about Ben. At approximately 3:50 p.m., Melissa returned to the room and tried to rouse Ben. She called Ben's name 3 times, but he did not respond. Melissa called for help, and other daycare providers entered the room. Ben was sitting in the bouncy chair and foaming from his nose. Other daycare providers began CPR on Ben. The daycare director called 911, and police and emergency responders arrived at the scene shortly thereafter. When daycare staff called 911, they reported Ben foaming, not breathing, and repeatedly vomiting while receiving CPR from the daycare staff. Daycare staff informed dispatch that Ben had been throwing up 2 days earlier and did not attend daycare the previous day. Police and paramedics arrived at the daycare center approximately 3 minutes after the 911 call, and Ben was transported to the hospital, where he was pronounced dead approximately 55 minutes later. So let me again say, or add on to this, that so the parents had brought Ben to the daycare a few days before this, and he had a bump and a bruise on his head. And the daycare did, whoa, wait a minute. He can't come here without a doctor's note saying that's been looked at, and, there's a paper trail, and that they can't be accused of causing this bump. So Ben had gone to a doctor, and a doctor said the kid was fine. On January 15, 2009, Dr. I don't know how you pronounce his first name, but last name Choi, so we're just going to say Dr. Choi, conducted the first autopsy of Ben, but did not conclude that the manner of death was a homicide. Externally, there were only 2 small bruises on Ben's body, one on his forehead and one on his right upper arm. Ben's internal organs were normal. The only evidence of injury appeared on Ben's head and brain. His spine was intact. He suffered no epidural hematoma, and there was no bruising around his neck, back, shoulders, legs, or buttocks. There was also no evidence of optic nerve bleeding. Dr. Choi observed a bluish-red area on Ben's scalp. There were no cuts or abrasions. Below the skin, but above the skull, Dr. Choi noted a subgaleal hemorrhage measuring approximately 4 inches by 4 inches. During Melissa's trial, Dr. Choi testified there was a 0.8-inch simple linear skull fracture that was visible from the upper and inner tables of the skull. Dr. Choi discovered blood beneath Ben's skull. Namely, there was blood in the dura, which in parentheses says membrane directly below the skull. The arachnoid membrane, and then in parentheses says below the dura, and the subarachnoid membrane, in parentheses it says below the arachnoid. The blood was only present on the right side of the brain. On January 16, 2009, I'm just going to say Dr. Montez, a non-board certified pathologist, arrived at the Lake County Coroner's Office to examine Ben's body. Dr. Montez was brought in by the state to bolster the weak opinion of Dr. Choi and to pressure him into deciding this was a homicide. Dr. Montez performed an unorthodox, unreported, undocumented, unphotographed, and undisclosed examination of Ben's body, brain, and skull. Dr. Montez described his examination as a curbside consult. However, according to Dr. Montez, he went beyond simply consulting and performed an examination of the entire body. Based on his exam, Dr. Montez concluded that Ben suffered violent trauma to his head that was not self-inflicted. Remember? This guy's not certified and doesn't know what he's doing, yet he's going to claim this. On January 16, 2009, Melissa was interrogated by investigators Falenko, he's horrible, and Curran. The interrogation began at 9:35 a.m. and lasted over 9 hours. During Melissa's interrogation, Melissa began by telling the detectives the truth. She explained that when Nancy left the room, Ben was in his bouncy chair and started to fall asleep. She called Ben's name, but he did not respond. She summoned help, and Crystal began CPR. She denied harming Ben intentionally or by accident. Over the next several hours, in an effort to obtain an inculpatory statement from her, the detectives falsely told her it was a medical fact that someone harmed Ben and that the person did so immediately before Ben became unconscious. The detectives convinced Melissa that only she was present with Ben when the fatal injuries were inflicted. They stated that the medical evidence clearly and unequivocally established her guilt, telling her, quote, "We've got this narrowed down to a very, very tight time frame. And there is only one thing here, is that something happened when you got frustrated, aggravated, whatever. And I'm telling you, it was not intentional. It was an accident. But it wasn't him flipping backwards. It wasn't. You know that. We know that. The forensic scientists are telling us that." Unquote. Footnote. Footnote says, see Group Exhibit A, recording of Melissa Calusinski's interrogation contained in the Part 3 folder in the file called blah, blah, blah. Now, also, Melissa has told me that all of her interrogation is not available. They have spliced some of it out of there. All right, back up. This statement is absolutely false. The detectives created a story and fed it to Melissa. After repeated denials, Melissa succumbed to their suggestions that Ben was injured as a result of an accident. Melissa, who had been traumatized by a prior... I'm not even going to say that. I'm not even going to say. I know what that is, and Melissa and I have talked about it, but I'm not saying it. So we'll just say Melissa's been traumatized and suffered extreme mental anguish when she was trapped in a small room by the two detectives. As a result, she was led through varying scenarios as to how Ben hit his head. As to each scenario, the detectives contacted the medical examiner's office, where experiments were performed to determine whether the injuries could have occurred as described. The detectives then informed Melissa that the injuries could not have been inflicted as she had stated. It bothers me that police can lie to the people that they are interrogating just to trick them into saying things. And I just don't think that's how you get something accurate, you know. And I always think about waterboarding, where once upon a time I was for waterboarding because it's like bad people, you just trying to get it out of them, you waterboard them. And it was Jesse the Body Ventura, if you remember him, that used to be in when it was called WWF Wrestling. And he later became the governor of Minnesota. He's not somebody where we weren't aligned politically, but he had been a Navy SEAL, I believe, and he was extremely against waterboarding. He's this tough wrestler dude, but he said, that is torture, and you will say whatever you have to get out of it. So you will say you killed somebody when you didn't, because you want that torture to stop. So people lying to you and saying, oh, well, we've got doctors saying this or whatever. I don't think they should be able to lie to trick you into saying things. You're not tricking people into telling you the truth. At the conclusion of the interrogation, Melissa, in an effort to escape from the room, agreed to a final scenario posed by the detectives, stating that she got mad at Ben and threw him on the floor. Per the statement, Ben's head hit between the tile and the carpet, and afterwards Ben crawled to his chair. Incredibly, Nancy, who was 8 feet away when this alleged vicious attack took place, did not see or hear anything, ostensibly because she was standing at the sink with the water running and her back to Melissa at the time he was thrown, I'm adding this, thrown to the ground. Melissa demonstrated the manner in which she threw Ben to the ground using one of the detective's portfolios. Melissa, who is 5'2" and 120 pounds, I don't know if you can tell. In all my pictures with Melissa, all right, I'm 5'6", but I also kind of ducked down. I could have been 5'7" though when these pictures were taken. It wasn't until recently going to the doctor where he told me I was she told me I was 5'7", and I'm like, I have 5'6", and I've been 5'7" like most of my life here. I'm like, oh my God, I am old. I'm shrinking. Okay. Held the portfolio with 2 hands. She then bent her elbows slightly, lifted the portfolio toward her, and then pushed it towards the ground. She released the portfolio just above the floor. She claimed she saw the head bounce. Ben did not sustain a single injury to his back, shoulders, or neck as a result of allegedly being thrown to the ground. Melissa's story is completely inconsistent with the actual evidence. Medical evidence presented at trial. I am sweating. You might have to listen to this fan on. I'll turn it on low. It is, well, it's 80 degrees, but it's warm here. At trial, the state's theory was that Ben died of acute brain injuries caused by Melissa throwing him to the floor with enough force to fracture his skull. The defense's theory, and her defense at her original trial, was not Kathleen Zellner. The defense's theory was that Ben died from a rebleed of a chronic subdural hematoma that was caused by his headbanging. Ben's prior injury leading to his death. It was undisputed that Ben had a habit of throwing himself backwards while he was seated and hitting his head on the floor or whatever surface was behind him when he was angry. Sometimes Ben did this behavior with enough force to injure himself. There were various reported incidents of this. Nancy, one of the teachers in Ben's room on the date of his death, was interrogated by police on January 16, 2009. Nancy told police that Ben sporadically fell asleep, which she found to be unusual. Nancy found it very odd that for as long as she had known Ben, he would often want to go to sleep shortly after getting up from a nap. Nancy also told police that Ben would throw himself when he got upset. She described that Ben would throw his legs out and throw himself back on the floor. Nancy talked to Ben's mother, Amy, about this, and Amy responded that this was typical of Ben in that he was throwing himself back all the time and always bumping his head. Nancy described an incident with Ben to police during her interrogation. She told detectives that, like 2 months ago, Ben got a lump on his head. She stated that at that time she was cleaning or putting some toys away, and Brenda was putting Ben in the crib when Nancy heard a thump. Nancy informed police that Brenda quit working at Mini Subi that following day. Multiple witnesses at Melissa's trial testified that on October 27, 2008, Ben awoke from his nap at daycare with a large bump, also described as a large goose egg-like swollen bump that was the size of a golf ball on the back of his head. Daycare staff told Ben's mother about the bump, and Ben's mother took Ben to see a physician 2 days later as the area was still visibly swollen. On October 29, 2008, Ben's pediatrician observed the bump but chose not to order a CT scan or x ray to rule out bleeding or swelling of the brain. On November 20, 2008, Ben's mother brought Ben to another physician, Dr. Lum, complaining Ben was projectile vomiting and that he was not quite himself. Dr. Lum assumed that Ben was suffering from acid reflux. At Melissa's trial, Dr. Lum testified, repeated vomiting can be a sign of concussion. It can be a sign of increased cranial pressure. So repeated vomiting merits further inquiry as to what the nature of the vomiting is, unquote. In the first year of his life, Ben's head circumference was around the 50th percentile. On December 1, 2008, Ben's head circumference increased to the 75th percentile. By the time of his death, Ben's head measured in the 95th percentile for children his age. Despite Ben's injury on October 27, 2008, and his history of throwing back his head, no physician ever performed a CAT, CT, or MRI scan to determine whether Ben had a chronic pre-existing condition. No radiologist was ever consulted about Ben's head injuries before January 14, 2009. Ben's mother testified at Melissa's trial that just 2 days before his death, on January 12, 2009, Ben vomited 4 or 5 times at daycare and at home. Another daycare provider, Holly, testified they saw Ben vomit 4 to 6 times, almost 5 to 10 seconds apart, while Melissa was holding him. Holly's description of the vomit as spewing is consistent with projectile vomit, another symptom of a head injury. Because Ben was vomiting, Ben did not attend Minnesota on January 13, 2009. He returned to Minnesota on January 14, 2009, and died that day. Are you getting those dates there? And then another thing I should tell you is I don't remember how long Melissa had been working at this daycare. But when these first things occurred, Melissa wasn't working there. This had multiple locations. And so Melissa's sister, Crystal, worked at this one. And Melissa had worked at the other one. And so she now transferred to this one. So the first reports of Ben having these bumps, Melissa wasn't even there. Next section is titled Melissa's Confession. At the time of Ben's death, Melissa was 22 years old. She's 38 now. She graduated from Barrington High School in 2005 and attended college for 3 months. She had no criminal history. She lived with her parents, but sometimes stayed with her boyfriend. Prior to being hired by Minnesota, she had worked in retail, in food service, and at her parents' bait shop. She had also done a lot of babysitting and worked for 4 years as a nanny for a family with 5 children. She worked as a teacher's assistant at the Minnesota in Arlington Heights, Illinois for about a year, and then transferred to the Lincolnshire Center in the fall of 2008. There were never any complaints about her performance at any of her numerous jobs. Numerous people who knew Melissa, including her high school guidance counselor, and says that person's name, though she had babysat the children of hundreds of times, and others who observed her around children, testified at Melissa's trial and stated that she was peaceful, kind-hearted, and did not believe she was capable of ever hurting anyone. No one ever witnessed Melissa harm Ben or any child in any way, and those who know Melissa know that she is not capable of doing such a thing. I don't know how long I've been visiting Melissa, how many years it's been. Okay. That one's that way. That way. That way. That way. And I got more pictures, but they're downstairs. I really need to bring them up here. I don't know how many times how many years I've been visiting Melissa. I talked to her just last week on the phone. we email. I know a lot about Melissa. I know her as a person and I know her heart. And this is a girl that is so kind-hearted. I mean, she's had the same bunkmate, bunkie they call them, for 5 years, which doesn't typically happen at her prison. You know, they move people around. But when you behave, you know, you get rewarded for good behavior. Melissa doesn't have a single write up. She has never been in trouble. And so she has had the same bunkie for 5 years. And this poor woman, I'm not even going to get into her story, but this is a woman who should not be in prison either. She is in prison because Illinois has the accountability law. So she was just at a place that a murder occurred. She didn't know it was happening. She was no part of it. She didn't do anything. And she's been in prison for 20 years now. And she's not even from this country. She was visiting from another country. So didn't even speak this language. Melissa's constantly taking care of her because this woman doesn't have, because she was here visiting her then husband's family. Her family is all back in Mexico. So she's got no family here to visit her. They don't let her use the phone very often because it's an international call. Nobody to put money on her books. So Melissa is always buying stuff for her and wanting her taken care of. And then, you know, always said that if she gets out, she still wants to take care of her bunkmate, and has asked me if she could pass on my contact information to her bunkmate and that if I could talk to her. And Melissa in prison, yeah, there's lots of drama. Let's be real. A lot of women together in this space. There's going to be drama. Melissa stays out of it. Has nothing to do with any of the crap. She keeps her nose clean. She goes to her room, just stays there, you know, and she works. She has always worked. She worked in the kitchen for a long time until she no longer wanted to do that job. She wanted to change, and they did not want to lose her because she was so good and so dependable. And so she's had this job, I think, a year now. You know, there's lots of people in prison who don't work at all because you don't have to work. You make money, but it's like nothing. Melissa's always worked. She cares more about others than she does herself. All right, let me go back to reading this. Despite Melissa's lack of any prior exhibitions or tendencies toward violent behavior, absolutely clean record, and reputation for being caring, kind, and providing the utmost best care to the children she watched over all the years she helped families, Melissa was extremely susceptible to manipulation. She won't be now. It was a known fact that Melissa had a very low IQ, always had very low grades in school, and was even classified in the borderline range by a neuropsychologist at the time of her trial. During the time of her interrogation, it was very clear that she suffered from cognitive defects, which are lifelong. So, Melissa, they would probably say at this point, I don't know if they had this 15 years ago, when Melissa's case was going on, they would probably say Melissa is on the spectrum. So those of you who follow me, most of the people who follow me come from Stephen Avery world. So think Brendan Dassey. That is Melissa Calusinski. Melissa had only been exposed to the criminal justice system once prior to her interrogation, and this greatly impacted her susceptibility to falsely confessing to something she did not do. Before this encounter with law enforcement, all right, I'm going to read this. I'm not happy about it. Melissa had been raped. She had been pinned down on a couch in a small room, and her perpetrator covered her head with a blanket during the sexual assault and kept her wrapped in the blanket all night. Melissa managed to escape the next morning and she reported the sexual assault to the police, but the perpetrator had removed forensic evidence of the sexual assault by the time police questioned him. No action was taken against her perpetrator. The experience was fresh in Melissa's mind when the detectives confronted her in the small room where she would spend the next 9 hours. The door remained shut at all times. She was never told she could leave or make a phone call. Nobody other than the police knew of Melissa's whereabouts. I've got stuff to say, but I'm as with all false confessions, false facts were provided to Melissa by the detectives, who were parroting what Dr. Choi was telling them. Dr. Choi provided false medical facts to the detectives about the absence of a chronic subdural hematoma and the presence of a skull fracture. Detectives pressured Melissa to mold her confession to fit these false medical facts. I don't think they should be called medical facts. There can be no more conclusive proof of the falsity of Melissa's confession than the false medical evidence created the final version of Melissa's confession. Next section is titled False Medical and Forensic Evidence Used in Melissa's Trial. After Melissa was convicted, it was discovered that the state withheld exculpatory evidence in the form of a readable X-ray, showing that there was no skull fracture. Before Melissa's trial, Melissa's defense attorney, Paul DeLuca, had issued several subpoenas for discovery. On September 28, 2009, Mr. DeLuca issued a subpoena to the Lake County Coroner's Office, requesting any and all morgue photographs, histology slides, microscopic reports, microscopic examination of the brain, DC and blood culture report, first call sheet, and any and all notes and or recordings, including any lab results of any items tested regarding the autopsy performed by Dr. Choi on Ben on January 15, 2009. On September 27, 2010, Mr. DeLuca issued a subpoena to Dr. Choi for his complete file regarding the autopsy of Ben, including, but not limited to, all photographs, all notes, memorandum, or any other documents in said file. Mr. DeLuca received additional documents, but not X-rays. On December 14, 2010, Mr. DeLuca issued another subpoena, this time to Deputy Coroner... Sorry, my sister. Where was I? This time to Deputy Coroner Paul Foreman at the coroner's office, who was present at the autopsy. Mr. DeLuca requested a copy of Dr. Choi's personal DVD containing photographs taken of the autopsy of Ben on or about January 15, 2009. Mr. DeLuca had learned that Dr. Choi had taken photographs during the autopsy. Again, Mr. DeLuca received documents in response to his subpoena, but X-rays were not included in the production. Mr. DeLuca testified that he did not specifically request skull X-rays in these subpoenas because the autopsy report did not refer to any X-rays being taken during the autopsy. However, because he knew that Dr. Choi identified a skull fracture during the autopsy based upon his review of the autopsy report, Mr. DeLuca suspected that Dr. Choi may have taken X-rays during the autopsy. Acting on his suspicion, Mr. DeLuca had a conversation with former Assistant State's Attorney Kristen Bishop regarding discovery. Specifically, Mr. DeLuca asked ASA Bishop if there was any X-rays in the file. On September 7, 2011, 8 weeks before Melissa's trial began, ASA Bishop gave Mr. DeLuca a disc containing 3 X-ray images and represented to the trial court that the images were not legible or readable. 2 of the images were of the upper torso, including the skull, and 1 was the lower torso. ASA Bishop further represented to the trial court that the x-rays were very illegible on the digital. According to ASA Bishop, the Lake County State's Attorney's Office was working with the coroner's office to obtain, for use by both the prosecution and defense, readable x-rays. That day, after Mr. DeLuca received the disc from ASA Bishop, he attempted to open it. Upon opening the disc on his office computer, Mr. DeLuca observed 3 image files and other icons. The first image Mr. DeLuca observed showed what appeared to be a white outline of the top of the skull, of a skull. The second image Mr. DeLuca observed was very dark, almost to the point of being black. The third image that Mr. DeLuca observed showed Ben's lower torso, from the middle of his waist to his feet. Because the images appeared dark and illegible, Mr. DeLuca asked his secretary for assistance. Mr. DeLuca attempted to open the other files on the disk, but nothing opened. During Melissa's trial, the state represented to the jury that Ben's death was clearly a homicide based upon the existence of a skull fracture, and mentioned the skull fracture 32 times during the trial. After Melissa's trial, on January 20, 2012, an experienced triple board certified forensic pathologist, Dr. Larry W. Blum, submitted an affidavit stating that Dr. Montez was not qualified to testify and offer opinions in Melissa's trial, that a childhood video of Ben walking in mid-November of 2008 showed that he was neurologically normal and manifested no signs of injury from the October 2008 incident. Dr. Blum pointed out several other flaws with the medical evidence presented. Further, after Melissa's trial in 2015, the law firm of Kathleen T. Zellner and Associates received a tip and requested that the new coroner, who was elected in 2012, Dr. Thomas A. Rudd, MSMD, re-examine the autopsy of Ben Kingen. Dr. Rudd reviewed Dr. Choi's autopsy report and participated with Melissa's attorneys in obtaining an affidavit from Dr. Choi, in which Dr. Choi acknowledged that he had failed to recognize a pre-existing subdural hematoma on Ben that had occurred on October 28, 2008. Dr. Rudd has submitted a letter in support of Melissa's clemency, stating the following. I might get emotional, and Dr. Rudd is a good guy, and what Lake County has done to Dr. Rudd because of him standing up for Melissa in this case is deplorable. They actually prosecuted Dr. Rudd, and I went to his clemency hearing. All right. Dr. Rudd, when I attended one of Melissa's court hearings, Dr. Rudd was there. Dr. Foreman was there. Paul DeLuca, her first attorney, was there. All these people who were there and saw this and see this as wrong and still support Melissa to this day. All right, on to Dr. Rudd. His letter says, upon my review of the case, I found an old chronic hemorrhage, not an acute bleed. To confirm my diagnosis of the diametrically opposed findings of the original pathologist diagnosis, I did multiple additional studies, including re-examining the original tissues and ordering special studies to confirm scientifically the acute or chronic nature of the bleeding in the brain. These studies proved without doubt that the child, Benjamin Kingen, and now this next section is all capitals, died of a chronic subdural hematoma, meaning Melissa Calusinski could not have caused this child's death. I then had the case reviewed by retired former Cook County Chief Medical Examiner, Dr. Nancy Jones, a board-certified forensic pathologist who was working part-time in our coroner's office. She agreed with my findings and wrote an extensive report of her opinions on the chronic nature of the injury. So the question that I asked myself at the time was, is there evidence of old injury to this child prior to his death? In fact, there was evidence. Approximately 6 weeks prior to this child's death, there was a documented report of an injury to the back of the child's head at the daycare center he was cared for. How that injury occurred was never found out. But there are a couple things, but I don't think I'm allowed to say. It should be noted that Melissa Calusinski was not employed at this time at the daycare center, so she could not be a suspect for causing that injury. Over the next 6 weeks, the child exhibited clear-cut symptoms of head injury, such as out-of-the-ordinary irritability, projectile, very forceful vomiting, unusual sleepiness, etc. He was taken to pediatricians, but they did not work the child up for head injury. The pediatricians missed his abnormally enlarging head circumference, indicating a severe brain injury. As a result, the pressure in his brain kept building up due to this chronic injury and subsequently damaged the brain and caused his death. Now you can see the picture that I have is the profile picture for Justice with Jax. You can see the x-ray. And you see this boy's head looks like a giant light bulb. So he got this prior injury and his brain was swelling. And this last day, he then died. Even if Melissa had dropped him or threw him, which she didn't do either, your brain doesn't swell like that and kill you in an hour. This is a tragic accident. I'm not going to say the other stuff. I am sad for Ben's parents, his twin sister, his other siblings, their family. But don't take it out on Melissa. Science proves Melissa did not do this. There is no way Melissa can drop or throw this kid to the ground and his brain is going to swell up like that and kill him in an hour. It is not possible. And all this stuff that's on the record of how the kid was behaving, Melissa didn't even work there. Melissa just happened to be in the room. There was another teacher in that room too. And they take Melissa into a tiny room, the Lake County Major Crimes Task Force, which this is not the first, the second, or the third time that they have forced people into a false confession. Lake County, Illinois is the wrongful conviction capital. There are multiple cases. And Marnie Yang, that we go to court for her in September of this year, that we got an evidentiary hearing, Marnie Yang is Lake County. Marnie Yang is also Lake County Major Crimes Task Force. Marnie Yang is also Falenko, the interrogator. Melissa is innocent. I am sorry to the Kingham family. Now, the Kingham family made a couple $1 million off this, not saying they did anything shady for that, but they've been paid. And Melissa has now lost 15 years of her life. Her young life, 22 when this started. Let her go. Back to the report, or the filing. After Dr. Rudd made his findings, he amended the death certificate of Ben Kingham to state that Ben's cause of death was from chronic subdural hematoma as a consequence of cerebral edema from an injury, bump on head, that occurred on October 27, 2008. Dr. Rudd changed Ben's manner of death from homicide to undetermined. And Lake County came after him for that, boy. Also, after Melissa's trial in 2015, the Lake County Coroner's Office identified and produced a second CD containing 5 X-ray images from Melissa's case. These 5 X-ray images were significantly brighter and more readable. Using these X-rays, Melissa's experts, including Dr. Nancy Jones, a triple board certified pathologist, concluded that the supposed skull fracture identified by the medical examiner during autopsy was an accessory suture that was wholly irrelevant to the descendant's death. That guy, Dr. Montez, testified that he saw and felt a fracture in that kid's head. There was no fracture. They lied and lied and lied. A world-renowned pediatrician neuroradiologist, Dr. Robert A. Zimmerman, MD, confirmed there was no skull fracture. Dr. Nancy Jones, who reviewed all the pertinent evidence and trial evidence concerning Melissa's conviction and provided an opinion after Melissa's trial, opined that the state was confusing a fracture with an accessory suture on Ben's skull. The readable X-rays further strengthened Dr. Jones' opinion that the mechanism of the decedent's death was cerebral edema, and that Melissa's description of inflicting the fatal injury were inconsistent with the mechanism of death. In 2016, Dr. Jones submitted another affidavit and attested. Undetermined. It is recognized, this is still quote from her, it is recognized in medical literature that a linear skull fracture in the occipital parietal, I don't know how you say that, area of the skull is frequently associated with abusive head trauma. Clearly, the non-existence of a linear skull fracture in this area weighs against the conclusion of abusive head trauma, unquote. She also attested, quote, the presence of a chronic subdural hematoma and the absence of a skull fracture, as demonstrated by the legible X-ray in Defendant's Exhibit 36 and the discredited opinions of Dr. Montez, are the basis of my opinion that the injury suffered by Ben Kingham that caused his death was not intentionally inflicted, and the manner of death should have been categorized as undetermined rather than homicide, unquote. In 2022, the Lake County State's Attorney's Office began a re-investigation of Melissa's case and recommended that the computer forensic firm of Garrett Discovery be hired to perform a forensic re-examination of the Lake County coroner's computer. Garrett Discovery produced a 38-page report, making the following conclusions. The state adjusted, this is the word adjusted is italicized, adjusted the settings of the images, and that resulted in black, washed out images which were unreadable. The state created is italicized, an optical disc DVD with the black, and now this is italicized, washed out images on September 6, 2011. The state gave is italicized, gave the optical disc DVD to the defense on September 7, 2011. The state, now this section is italicized, could have produced the original unaltered images to the defense, particularly in TIFF format, which would have allowed the defense experts to analyze the original baseline unedited X-ray images, which the prosecution had access to at the time of trial, and the state could have produced enhanced images with more definition than the original baseline X-ray images to the defense. We are now on page 19 of 37. As shown above, the wrongful conviction of Melissa Calusinski was based upon a false confession combined with fabricated medical evidence and manipulated computer evidence. Next section's titled Prior Criminal History. Aside from her conviction, Melissa has no criminal history. Oh, that was quick. On to the next section. Personal life history. Melissa was born to her mother, Cheryl Calusinski, and father, Paul Calusinski, on October 4, 1986, in Elgin, Illinois. Melissa was one of 3 sisters. She grew up in Carpentersville in Kane County, Illinois. She grew up in a 3-story, 3-bedroom house and shared a bedroom with her sister, Crystal. She describes her childhood as happy and recalls that she often played with neighborhood children. Her father loved animals and would rescue, still does, all types of animals, cats, dogs, and reptiles, and bring them to their house. I'll finish reading this and see if I have to add something here. Melissa recalls that on one of her and her father's adventures, she was sprayed by a skunk. Melissa shared her father's love for animals. Melissa, now a talented artist, she drew both of these, loved drawing pictures, especially of the family animals. She also developed a love for fishing because her father took her on his fishing trips. As a child, Melissa began working at her father's bait shop, which she worked at for 6 years. To this day, Melissa maintains a very close relationship with her family. All right, so let me go back to the animals. So her dad, Paul, I mean, he's the guy you call if you've got some kind of, I don't know what word you want to use, varmint. If you've got a varmint that, at your house that you need to get rid of, because Paul knows everything about any kind of animal you can imagine, and he'll go get rid of it. And I even took him once to my parents' house. It's really weird. I don't know what's happened to the town my parents live in, because it's a town I grew up in, and they're not in the same house I lived in as a child because the house burned down, and it's a new another house that was built there, and I was already moved out when their house burned down, so I've never lived in this house. But when I grew up there, I never saw a snake. But now my parents' house have garter snakes all over the place. And where Paul lives, there's no snakes. And snakes are good if you have a garden to get rid of the pests. And so Paul wanted to come to my parents' house to get garter snakes. So we went over there, and he brought a pillowcase and caught all these snakes and brought them to his house to let them out in his yard. And so Melissa, the job she's doing now at the prison, pest control. And her dad is her hero. I mean, and she's so unbelievably close also with her mom. But her dad, he owned a bait shop. And Melissa worked at that bait shop, picking up worms with her hands. My husband has several boats. We go fishing every week. So that's one of the things when I talk with Melissa. She wants to know about our fishing adventures. And she can't wait to go fishing with her dad. But she has a love of animals. And it's hanging up downstairs. But she drew me a picture of a wolf. And I have it framed, and it's downstairs. But she also drew a monarch butterfly, and this is called the Melissa Blues butterfly, and we'll get to that later. And so she drew me these and sent, because I love butterflies. I've got multiple butterflies tattooed on me. Nope, that's the moth over here. There's the yellow one. I got butterflies all over. And Melissa and I both love monarch butterflies. So she drew me the monarch, and she drew me the Melissa Blues, sent it to me for my birthday, and I told her I'll get it tattooed on me, and I did. These are her actual drawings, and I'll touch on that again. All right, so let me go back to reading this. Mm-mm. Melissa began to babysit when she was 13 years old. Her first babysitting job was babysitting a 1 year old, a 3 year old, and a 7 year old. The family was extremely happy with her babysitting their kids. Melissa additionally babysat for a family of 4 children in Algonquin, Illinois. Melissa was always known to be great with kids. As far as Melissa's academic life, she had trouble focusing in school, and throughout most of her educational years, she was provided with special education services. Melissa describes her time in school as such, quote, I had a hard time functioning. I was just really slow, unquote. In fifth grade, Melissa was bused to a different school for special education and placed in smaller classrooms. In sixth or seventh grade, Melissa was put in special reading classes as she always struggled with reading comprehension and sentence formation. In high school, when for some reason the special education services were not offered to Melissa, she suffered poor grades and barely graduated, being in the bottom 10% of her graduating class. So let me tell you one of the things Melissa has asked me for in the time she's been in prison, which Melissa does not ask for much. And so when Melissa does ask me for something, I jump on it because I am so happy to get something for her. She asked for a GED book because she feels that she's wasting away in there, and they don't have the right kind of classes for Melissa, and so she feels like what she did learn in high school she's losing now. And so she thought the best way for her to try and sharpen her skills would be a GED book. So I sent her a GED book like 3 years ago. Um, Unfortunately, Melissa was the target of bullying as a child. She was always a very passive, quiet person and exhibited limited intellectual abilities. Kids bullying her was a reoccurring and very damaging theme through Melissa's time at school. It became so extreme that her high school counselor would allow Melissa to come to his office during breaks so that she could avoid getting bullied. He believed that Melissa was targeted in part because of her family, who appeared unusual to others as they were known to keep wild animals, including raccoons and squirrels, in their house. Further exasperating Melissa's fears growing up, Melissa was brutally sexually assaulted in 2006 by an acquaintance at the age of 18. Next section is titled Reasons for Seeking Clemency. My husband's pulling in on his motorcycle, so my dog's here and are barking. Melissa Calusinski respectfully seeks clemency from the governor for 4 independently persuasive reasons. 1. The board can have no confidence in the evidence against Melissa Calusinski. 2. This board can have no confidence in the process leading to Melissa Calusinski's conviction. And 3. This board can have no confidence in the justice of or the continuing need for Melissa Calusinski's sentence. 1. This board can have no confidence in the evidence against Melissa Calusinski. Melissa's conviction is built entirely on a false confession that Melissa gave during an extensive interview conducted by 2 police officers who told Melissa false medical assertions, which were later also presented to Melissa's jury. Since Melissa's trial, Melissa's confession has been reviewed and studied extensively by the medical and forensic community as well as the general public. The medical and forensic consensus is that Melissa's confession is not reliable. For the first time, Melissa is presenting the expert opinions of 3 renowned experts who helped support the conclusion that Melissa's confession was involuntary and was coerced as a result of Melissa's limited intellectual abilities and her severe PTSD. Let me add this. This again is due to my work that I'm in the political world. Last election cycle, I don't know if it was last election cycle or the cycle before that, one of the cops that interrogated Melissa and her judge were running in the primary. They were the same party. They were running in the primary to go on the Illinois Supreme Court. And so now these two men, since they were running against each other, were going at each other. And it was getting ugly. I should look for this and post it because this happened a couple years ago. So the cop does an article, an interview. And I had posted it when I came across it. But he now states that he and the judge and that everyone knew Melissa was innocent at this time. And so this guy was trying to make that judge look bad. But it's like, dude, you were interrogating her too. And knowing she was innocent at the time and doing nothing and letting her be convicted of it and saying nothing until now when you're trying to get on Illinois Supreme Court, it's infuriating to me. Both of them lost. And somebody who's a friend of mine is now on the Supreme Court. Anyway, Dr. Sol Casson, an internationally recognized expert on false confessions, conducted a detailed analysis of Melissa's confession in 2023. The footnote says, it's just a report. He concluded that there were multiple concerns about the way that Melissa's interview was conducted, which raised the likelihood that Melissa's confession was false. Related to this, he raised concerns about Melissa's vulnerability to coercion given her cognitive limitations as well as her trauma history. In his report, Dr. Casson writes, quote, during the course of her lengthy interrogation, Melissa repeatedly exhibited the symptoms characteristic of the phenomenology of innocence, the opposite of a guilty conscience, unquote. Dr. Casson provides many examples of quotes from the interrogations which demonstrate his point. Dr. Casson observes that, quote, over the course of 10 hours, Melissa was transitioned from adamant denial to 1, a witness confession in which she said that she saw Ben fall back on his own, 2, an accident confession in which she said she was holding Ben and dropped him, and 3, a homicide confession in which she said that she threw Ben to the ground out of anger and frustration. The content for all of these variants was initiated by Detectives Falenko and Curran, e.g., they introduced and repeated the words accident and mistake. Then later in the session, they introduced angry and slammed. Eventually, Melissa incorporated these words and themes into her answers to their questions, unquote. Dr. Casson points out several other observations in his report, including that, quote, there is no independent extrinsic evidence to corroborate Melissa's confession. No co-workers present at Minnie Subi daycare reported witnessing her drop or throw Ben to the ground on January 14 or any other day. In fact, her co-workers failed to substantiate the story initiated by detectives that Ben and other children in the room were screaming and crying. No forensic evidence implicated her. No informant reported that she had admitted culpability to them. No surveillance footage was presented, unquote. Ultimately, in Dr. Casson's 35-page report, he concludes, quote, I strongly believe that Melissa Calusinski's confession is of questionable reliability in light of her personal vulnerabilities and the process by which it was elicited. I note, too, that this confession was contaminated by the communication of details and not corroborated either by proof of guilty knowledge or by independent extrinsic evidence, unquote. And so even how they have Melissa demonstrate how she dropped or threw Ben down, the injuries he had don't match. Dr. Cassin's extensive analysis calls for a critical reevaluation of Melissa's case because it not only provides insight into the psychological factors and situational dynamics that drive a false confession, but also because substantial progress has been made in research on false confessions since Melissa's trial, which has made the medical forensic community increasingly aware of unexpected or counterintuitive factors that are highly relevant for evaluating the veracity of a confession. Besides Dr. Cassin, a Yale School of Medicine team of medical professionals comprised of Alexander Westphal, MD, PhD, who is a general child and adolescent and forensic psychiatrist and an associate professor adjunct in the Division of Law and Psychiatry at the Yale School of Medicine, as well as Catherine Thomas, JD, PhD, a licensed psychologist and attorney, and an associate research scholar at the Justice Collaboratory at Yale Law School and the Psyche Center for Health and Justice at Yale School of Medicine, additionally support the view that Melissa's confession is completely unreliable. Both Dr. Westphal and Dr. Thomas extensively reviewed Melissa's interrogation tape and state in their report, quote, "During the interrogation, Melissa repeatedly denied her involvement in harming the infant. She did this consistently over hours, but over time, we believe that she was manipulated into believing that she must confess to end the interrogation, and then over many more hours was fed the details that were necessary to provide a confession that was accepted by the detectives," unquote. After extensively reviewing relevant records, interviewing Melissa extensively, conducting a psychological assessment, and speaking with Melissa's parents and a guidance counselor from Melissa's high school, Dr. Westphal and Dr. Thomas concluded that Melissa has post-traumatic stress disorder and borderline intellectual functioning. Dr. Westphal and Dr. Thomas explain in their extensive report that, quote, "Results of the current psychological testing revealed that Melissa has significant weaknesses in verbal comprehension, processing speed, and sentence comprehension. She had particularly marked impairment in sentence comprehension. Her performance was consistent with someone functioning at the 4.8 grade level," unquote. Medical research has revealed that people with intellectual disabilities are at heightened risk of false confessions. Dr. Westphal and Dr. Thomas opine that, quote, "Melissa's significant deficits in verbal and sentencing comprehension impacted her ability to understand the questions asked by detectives and the information provided by detectives. This was exacerbated by Melissa's deficits in processing speed, the fluency with which the brain receives, understands, and responds to information. Additionally, Melissa's processing speed deficits impacted her ability to take in information and respond to questions during the interrogation," unquote. Further, Dr. Westphal and Dr. Thomas opine, quote, "In addition to Melissa's borderline intellectual functioning, her PTSD likely exacerbated her cognitive impairments and heightened her risk of falsely confessing," unquote. Melissa described to the doctors in detail how her interrogation reminded her of the rape in 2006, how she felt trapped in a small space with no room to escape, and that during and after the interrogation, she felt that it was a blur and not real. Dr. Westphal and Dr. Thomas believe that, quote, "It is likely that Melissa's PTSD symptoms, including her symptoms of disassociation, increased her risk of falsely confessing by impacting several necessary cognitive functions, including her ability to pay attention, manage her impulses, and make decisions," unquote. Dr. Westphal and Dr. Thomas bring attention to yet another factor affecting Melissa during her interrogation. They state in their report, quote, An additional factor exacerbating Melissa's vulnerability to confess falsely is her general social naivete and her tendency to comply, unquote, and explains that these traits, quote, likely stem from her borderline intellectual functioning, unquote. Ultimately, Dr. Westphal and Dr. Thomas state in their report the following concerning Melissa's interrogation. Quote, Melissa was at high risk for giving a false confession at the time of her arrest. The process and nature of the police interview also heightens the concern that she gave a false confession. We are both deeply concerned that this is what occurred and urge a reconsideration of her case, unquote. Besides Melissa's new experts, there are numerous individuals from the community of people who study criminal cases that have written to Melissa's post-conviction counsel about their views of Melissa's interrogation and her case. Footnote is just saying that they've also submitted the letters of support. The consensus of the community of individuals who have viewed Melissa's confession and are very familiar with her case, including those who have written to her for years, is that Melissa's confession is false and that Melissa is absolutely innocent. For all the reasons set forth in this entire petition, there can be absolutely no confidence in the evidence used against Melissa in order to achieve her conviction. Next section, the board can have no confidence in the process leading to Melissa Calusinski's conviction. Despite the clear problems with the case against Melissa in regard to the manner in which her confession was obtained, her trial was marked by serious flaws in the integrity of the evidence presented. As a primary matter, Melissa's defense attorney was barred from introducing a false confession expert in Melissa's trial. Thus, the plethora of information and expert analysis on Melissa's confession was never known by Melissa's jury. Further, Melissa's trial defense attorney did not present evidence of Melissa's prior rape incident to support the unreliability and falsity of her confession. Because let me just say, Melissa was victimized more than once by that rape. Because when she tries to do the right thing and reports it, she's not believed. So that's going to make you feel a way about police. In his affidavit, Melissa's prior defense attorney states that he was unaware that Melissa was a victim of an aggravated sexual assault, but did not consult with experts to determine if this was a factor of post-traumatic stress disorder, which could have affected her during her interrogation. As a result, this information was also never heard by the jury for it to properly assess the reliability of Melissa's confession. Because Melissa doesn't like to talk about it, obviously. So Melissa, in her mental capacity, doesn't realize that her rape and nothing being done about it would affect her on why she would now fall to whatever the police were saying to her. She didn't know. She doesn't want to talk about her rape. She doesn't want people to know about her rape. So, yeah, she's not going to bring it up. She's not thinking one would have anything to do with the other and that it's nobody's business. Additionally, as described in detail in the statement of facts, the medical evidence presented against Melissa at her trial was undoubtedly false. The photographs used to portray a skull fracture and thus allow the state to argue that Ben's death was a homicide were later discovered to have been altered in a manner to hide that there was, in fact, no skull fracture. After further review of this case by medical professionals, including Dr. Rudd, there is absolutely no confidence in the medical evidence that was used against Melissa. Dr. Rudd specifically writes in his letter of support for Melissa. This letter of support, these are the letters people just wrote. So 15 years later, Dr. Rudd is still writing letters. for Melissa. Quote, I have reviewed this case with multiple pathologists nationwide. These pathology experts all agree with the new diagnostic findings of a chronic brain injury. In fact, no one has countered with a report disagreeing with the current analysis! Exclamation point. Melissa Calusinski has had a great injustice happen to her. She has been in prison for a very long time unjustly. Melissa Calusinski should be freed from prison as soon as possible. Unquote. Thank you, Dr. Rudd. In light of all the unfairness in Melissa's trial, which resulted in her conviction, there can be no confidence in her verdict. Next section. This board can have no confidence in the justness of or the continuing need for Melissa Calusinski's sentence. Melissa's gentle and kind character have been proven time and again over the course of her 15 years of incarceration. Her prison records show that she is a model prisoner with no disciplinary tickets. While incarcerated, Melissa has been selected for a leadership program. Yeah, she's in a leadership program right now too, and she likes it because of her outstanding prison record. The leadership program has a select group of inmates try to mentor and guide other inmates in a positive direction of rehabilitation. A second program that Melissa is currently involved in is a prison fellowship program, which has a curriculum involving Bible study and homework based upon the Bible. Melissa is Catholic, and she is very faithful to her religion, and in her many drawings, that she's an artist, she likes to draw the praying hands with the rosary with a Bible. And I believe she's drawn one of that and had sent to her parents. Oh my gosh, I'm mentioned here. But let me read over here. Only 30 inmates were selected to participate in this program in exchange for 50 days of good time. The next paragraph is me. And I didn't know that. Melissa's peaceable nature justifies her release. Many people who have known her for years can attest to Melissa's wonderful and peaceful character. Jacqueline West, who has been visiting Melissa at Logan Correctional for several years and regularly talking to her on the phone, writes, quote, Melissa is a very caring, loving person. She truly cares more about others than she does for herself. Her parents are her world, and she talks all the time about how when she finally goes home, she wants to take care of them, unquote. Further, Jacqueline writes, quote, Melissa has had the same bunkie for years, and she takes care of her as well. Melissa always has a job, and she stays away from any kind of trouble. Every time I visit, many of the security guards that I talk to ask when Ski in quotes, that's what they call her. Her nickname is Ski for Calusinski, is finally going home. Even the people who stock the vending machines in the visitors' room have told me they know Melissa is innocent and ask when she will get out of there, unquote. And that's no lie. Every time I go there, because I have to say who I'm visiting, and all the officers tell me they know she's not guilty. When is she going home? And when her parents go visit her, because me and her parents are the only people who visit Melissa. And every time her parents visit, they get the same treatment. When is Melissa going home? And they're not blowing smoke, because I have to be walked to the visitor's room with other people visiting. Nobody's saying anything to the other people, anything about the people they're visiting. But they always say something about Melissa. Always. There are people, and I don't know if they've done it, but Melissa has told me there are people at the prison that want to write a letter in support. I don't know who all have written a letter. I know my husband has. I know I work for a state representative. She has not written one yet, but she's going to. We have till July 8th to write a letter. Another state representative that I'm friends with, I know she wrote a letter because when she sent it to Kathleen, she CC'd me. Um, so I could read the letter. Um, I know the mayor of her parents' town is going to write a letter. Oh. All right, back to me. Look, Kathleen Zellner left me in here. Should Melissa be released from prison, her support system is vast and has arranged for a wide array of support: educational, therapeutic, and medical assistance. Melissa's family has been waiting for her to come back home for the last 15 years with open arms. Melissa would return to her parents' home that she grew up in. I'm not saying the town, even though I have before. Further, Melissa and her family have the unwavering support of Tom Roser. I'm not reading all that. That's Melissa's mom, Cheryl's boss. Oh my God! So who has employed Melissa's mother, Cheryl, at his company for 25 years, and it's such a great company. The way they treat their employees. The Calusinskis tell me like of the holiday parties they attend and stuff, and just this man's caring and support of Melissa, because a lot of people, I believe Melissa's dad's bait shop went bye-bye because of this, because of people just instantly going, Melissa's a baby killer, right? And so for Cheryl's boss to not instantly go with, oh, must be guilty, and then like fire Cheryl. Cheryl's now worked there 25 years. So think of that. Melissa's been in prison for 15 years. So Mr. Roser states in his letter of support, quote, the Calusinski family is a close-knit, valued one. I have never known them to have any issues. They are good neighbors, unquote. Further, chairman of Lava Media, Jason Flom, you can Google him, Jason Flom. He does a lot of wrongful conviction stuff, FLOM. Jason Flom, I believe, was on Dr. Oz with Melissa's dad, talking about Melissa's case. Jason Flom has submitted a letter in support of Melissa's clemency. Kalia Ali, the daughter of boxer and humanitarian Muhammad Ali, who is carrying on her father's legacy through this noble cause, has co-signed the letter. The letter states the following, quote, we have had the privilege of getting to know Ms. Calusinski and found her to be a woman of courage, compassion, and kindness. Having suffered for 13 years at that time in prison after an unfair legal proceeding, remarkably, her spirit remains intact. Kalia and I have grown to consider Melissa a friend, and she is someone we hope to remain close to for a very long time. She would be a welcome guest in our home, and upon her release, we will help her find meaningful employment and a decent place to live. We believe that Melissa will make a positive impact in the free world upon her release, just as she has brought about positive change inside the prison walls. Melissa and I have talked about things upon her release, and I big time have told her for like the first month that she's out, I do not want her going home. Terrell Barnes. Sorry, Terrell, I can't talk to you right now. I do not want her going home. I want her going to a hotel. I have said I will pay for the hotel. I will put her parents in a hotel with her in an adjoining room, whatever, but I want to hide them because the Calusinski home is well known, and I think Melissa and her immediate family, she's got nieces and nephews she's never met. I think I want to put her family in a hotel for like a month. Go there where nobody can find you and you and your family can reconnect and decompress. Then she could go home. You know what I'm saying? And just like they're saying the same, I've told Melissa she is welcome at my house. I have cameras. There's like 15 cameras on the outside of my house, and now my husband has started putting cameras inside the house. There's one on our porch, there's one in our theater, there's one in our family room, there's one in the kitchen. uh, I flip them off every time I walk past too. My husband's a creeper watching everything. There's cameras all over. I have a German Shepherd, a pit bull, and then 2 smaller dogs. Nobody's getting in this house with, so it's like, you need some place to be safe. You are welcome here. I have somebody who, because Melissa, when you hear the Brendan Dassey case and Brendan just thought he was going to go back to class, and wanted to watch wrestling, Melissa wanted to go home to her puppy Oreo. Oreo has died while she has been in prison. So I already have somebody that I met through the Stephen Avery case who is going to give her a puppy when she is home and ready for one. I have somebody who will give her a job. So Melissa will be a functioning person in society and is no danger to anyone. All right, back to this. As shown in the dozens and dozens of letters of support attached to Melissa's petition, Melissa has a strong, vast network of supporters waiting with open arms for her release from prison. In the newest study done and book regarding our criminal justice system's stringent procedural rules, the distinguished professor of law and criminal justice at Northeastern University, Daniel S. Medwed, argues that stringent procedures guarantee criminal defendants just one chance to appeal their convictions directly to a higher court, and that afterward few remedies are available to the wrongfully convicted, and that even with strong evidence of a miscarriage of justice, rigid guidelines, bias, and deference toward lower courts all too often prevent exoneration through the judicial process. Medwid, Daniel S., I guess he wrote this, that's called Barred, Why the Innocent Can't Get Out of Prison, September 20th, 2022. This holds true for Melissa's case, as it has already gone through many of the stringent procedural hurdles of the legal process to no avail. This is Melissa's first petition for executive clemency and an opportunity to correct the failures of our justice system. New evidence that has never been presented before the court system shows that Melissa is actually innocent and that her conviction can no longer stand. Therefore, Melissa, her post-conviction counsel, and all of her supporters respectfully ask this board to recommend that the governor grant her clemency. The last section is titled Type of Clemency Desired. Petitioner, Melissa Calusinski, by and through her undersigned counsel, Kathleen T. Zellner and Associates, P.C., hereby respectfully requests that the governor of Illinois exercise his clemency powers by granting her an exoneration of her first-degree murder based on actual innocence, or, in the alternative, granting her a commutation of sentence to time served. Respectfully submitted, Kathleen T. Zellner. So, hearing information. Petitioner would like to request an appointment to appear at a public hearing before the review board, along with counsel and the following witnesses. First one is Catherine Thomas from the Yale School of Medicine. Next is attorney Paul DeLuca, Melissa's first attorney. Next one, Paul Calusinski, her dad. And that is everything. So her hearing is in Springfield, Illinois, which is our capital, on Tuesday. Tuesday? July 9th? Is it Tuesday? Yep, Tuesday, July 9th at 9:30 a.m. Now, when I went to Dr. Rudd's clemency hearing, which wasn't down in Springfield, it was in Chicago. Um, but the way it was, it's not really long. It's like your witnesses, each witness only has 5 minutes to speak, and you're also limited to how many you can have. I think it may be just a three. So it'll be, Kathleen gets to present, and then the three people speak, and then the state also will have their time and speak. And then I don't know how long they have until they have to decide. But Kathleen is still accepting letters in support of Melissa's clemency. And I've got a million posts on Justice with Jax with the graphic of, and I would prefer you email it to Kathleen because that's the quickest way it gets there and it doesn't get lost. So look at that graphic and write to Melissa. Have I had it? Okay. Um, so yeah, Sherry, we don't know how long they have to decide. I am going. Um, it is a 2.5 hour drive for me. So I thought about going and staying in a hotel, and then just being there in the morning since it's so early. But instead, I'm just gonna get up early and drive down there, just like I do when I go visit Melissa in prison. That I, gotta start driving at like 6 in the morning or whatever. So I'm just driving down there and attending this, and then we'll be driving back same day. Um, and my husband owns a print shop, and I asked Kathleen if people can wear shirts in support of Melissa because Melissa's dad, Paul, I should have grabbed that shirt. Um, he still got a bunch of shirts in support of Melissa, and he wants to give that. He doesn't have a whole bunch, but it would be first come first served on getting the shirt in support of Melissa. And so me being extra, it's I wanted my husband to design a shirt for me. And I already have shirts in support of Melissa. Oh, this is the shirt that Paul is going to give people. So the first time I visited Stephen Avery in prison, I wore that shirt. Free Melissa. Because that's how I worked it. The first time I visited Stephen, I wore Free Melissa. And the first time I visited Melissa, I wore Injustice Avery wear. That's how I roll. So I had my husband make me a shirt, and I remember to grab it to show you all. I don't know if Paul's gonna watch this. I wanted this shirt to be a surprise for Melissa. Melissa knows. I told her about it on the phone the other day. Um, but here's the shirt I had my husband make. So pink is Melissa's favorite color. And so it's an open bird cage with the Melissa Blues butterfly coming out of the cage. And then it's the hashtag free Melissa Calusinski. And then the free Melissa Calusinski is on the back. Isn't this perfect? The Melissa Blues butterfly. And then when I was talking to Melissa, I said, ooh, I'll have Jeff, my husband, make a shirt for her mom too. So I asked Melissa what size shirt her mom wears. And so I'll be giving one to Cheryl when I get there. So Paul, if you watch this, because Cheryl doesn't go online, Melissa's mom's not on social media or doing any of that. So Paul, if you watch this, don't tell Cheryl that I had Jeff make a shirt for her. So I'll be bringing that with me. And then I don't have them yet, but the last time, Melissa, when we went to court, I made, should have had one of the bracelets here. I should put one of them on and start wearing them all the time. But I had Justice for Melissa, those rubber bracelets. I had those made for Melissa, and I still have some. And so, like, I even gave one to Kathleen Zellner at court, and she wore it during court. And what's her face from 48 Hours, Erin Moriarty, was there filming for 48 Hours, and I gave her one. So I now had my husband make a new one that is just going to be the hashtag free Melissa Calusinski. And then on either side of the free Melissa Calusinski, it's a butterfly. And it's just, so it's a pink wristband and the writing in white. So the butterfly's just in white, nothing fancy or whatever. And I think I don't know if he ordered 25 or 50 bracelets to print on. So I'll be bringing those and giving them to people to wear in support of Melissa. Not the shirts. Paul's got the few shirts. These pink shirts are just for me and Cheryl. If Kathleen saw this and she wanted one, she wouldn't wear it to court. But if she wanted one, I would absolutely give one to Kathleen. And Kathleen's office is one town over from me. Her office is literally 15 minutes from my house. So, and the wristbands, like I said, I'm just going to give to people that are there in support of her. So, and I should ask my husband when those are going to be in, because as soon as we get it, I'm going to put it on and not take it off. And I think I'm going to put it on and not take it off until there's a decision in Melissa's case. Get off of here. I just had an antivirus thing pop up. Get off. So find the graphic. So Sherry's asking, what can people do to help her? Write a letter in support of Melissa's clemency. And I had even done AI. And so I said to AI, write a letter in support of clemency from Melissa Calusinski. And in a minute, it wrote this perfect letter. So I've even posted it on Justice with Jax a couple of times for you to use as an example. So write a letter and then email it to Kathleen. And on that graphic is the email to use to email a letter of support for Melissa. And as I said, Melissa is very into her Catholic religion. So if you are somebody who is religious, Melissa would appreciate if you say a prayer for her. Keep her in your prayers. Melissa is innocent. If you're somebody who watches this and you have questions about Melissa's case, there are 2 48 Hours episodes. You can find them on YouTube. One is called The Fight for Melissa, and one is titled Blaming Melissa. There is a post that you can find here on Justice with Jax where I even included those links. I included a ton of links in a post that I made where you could go to Kathleen Zellner's website where you could see, because there was a camera in the last time we were in court. So you can see Kathleen's argument that time in court. So you can watch more about the case. You can see Melissa herself when she's talking to the camera and, see for yourself these things. You don't have to take my word for it. But I know I'm somebody who is known as an advocate for the wrongfully accused. But I'm telling you, if I was to find that any of these people that I advocate for are guilty, I wouldn't be supporting them. Now, obviously, Melissa is different than Stephen Avery. Stephen Avery and I don't even talk. Stephen only reaches out to me when he needs me for something. Um, Melissa is family to me. You know, I go visit Melissa. I try to visit her now that I work full time, it's harder. But before I had a job, I was visiting her twice a month. 2.5 hour drive down, 2.5 drive back in a day, plus your 4 hour visit. Long day. Um, Now I'm chief of staff for a state representative. So it's not as easy for me to go visit because I only visit Melissa on weekdays because her parents can only visit on a weekend. And I'm never going to interfere, because they're only allowed X amount of visits. So I'm not going to do something that's going to screw up her parents' ability to go visit, so I have to do a weekday. So I have to take off of work. Just like now I have to take off work for that hearing. And then when Marnie Yang goes to trial, or her evidentiary hearing, I'm going to take off and go to that. And if we hear that Stephen Avery, I'm going to take off and go to that. Luckily, my boss is very understanding. My boss was a lawyer, well, still a lawyer, but so she's a lawyer, now a state representative. So, yeah, this is, a big one for me because Melissa is a good person. And all the evidence is there to show that she is innocent. And this is a tragic accident. So I've been on for almost 2 hours. I came here directly from work. I'm going to end this now. So please email your letter in support of Melissa's clemency. You can Google how to write a letter in support of clemency. That's what I did to write the one that I sent in for Melissa. Um, so Google it, write a letter. If you have any questions about the case or Melissa, you can message Justice with Jax. You can email me at justicewithjax@gmail.com. As for the other cases, I don't know when I'll go live to talk about anything else. We're waiting to hear on Stevens. Marnie, we've got a date set somewhere. I don't remember what it is. But it's not till fall. So I'm laser focused on Melissa's case right now. It is right around the corner, July 9th. I'm going to go. I hope you all have a good weekend, that you aren't in extreme heat like we have here in the Chicago area. And we've got cicada apocalypse going on right now, which I think is fun. I'm not bothered by the cicadas. And it's kind of neat. Only once in 17 years. I can deal once in 17 years. All right. Thank you, everybody. As always, investigation continues.